Picture this. You're sitting at your desk on a Tuesday morning, coffee still steaming, when you get an email that makes your blood run cold. Effective immediately, your office will be relocated to accommodate departmental restructuring. Please pack your belongings by end of business today. The sender, your ex-husband's new wife, who somehow landed a job at your company just 3 weeks ago, and that new office she's assigning you, it's in the basement, next to the boiler room, where the Wi-Fi barely reaches and the fluorescent lights flicker like a horror movie. That was my reality, 6 months ago, and what happened next changed everything. Because sometimes, when someone tries to bury you, they don't realize they're just planting seeds. And honey, those seeds grew into something she never saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I never thought my biggest workplace nightmare would walk through the door wearing a wedding ring that used to be mine. Well, not literally mine, but you know what I mean. The ring Kevin gave Jessica was almost identical to the one I threw back at him during our divorce 2 years ago, except hers had a bigger diamond. Of course it did. I was 34, a single mom trying to rebuild my life one insurance claim at a time. Hartwell Insurance Group wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, and after the chaos of my marriage falling apart, stable felt like winning the lottery. I'd been there for 3 years, working my way up from assistant to senior marketing coordinator, and I was proud of what I'd built. My office on the 8th floor had a decent view of downtown Denver, and more importantly, it had a door I could close when I needed to pump milk for Emma or take calls from her school. Emma was 8, brilliant, and the only good thing that came out of my marriage to Kevin. We had shared custody, which meant every other week I got to be a full-time mom, and the alternate weeks I threw myself into work with the desperation of someone trying to prove she wasn't a failure at everything. Those work weeks were my sanctuary, my chance to be Sarah the professional, instead of Sarah the divorced mom who ate cereal for dinner because cooking for one felt pointless. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I arrived at Hartwell at 7:30, an hour before most people, because the early morning quiet helped me think. The marketing department was empty, except for the hum of computers and the distant sound of the custodial crew finishing their round. I loved this time of day when the building felt like it belonged to me alone. I settled into my desk chair, the one I'd bought with my own money because the company issued one hurt my back, and opened my laptop. 3 new emails waited for me, which was normal. What wasn't normal was recognizing one of the sender names before I'd had my coffee, Jessica Parker. Except now it was Jessica Mitchell, and seeing that name in my work inbox felt like finding a spider in my bed. My hands hesitated over the keyboard. Kevin had mentioned during one of our awkward custody exchanges that Jessica was looking for a new job, something about wanting to get out of retail management. But surely it was a coincidence. Denver was a big city with thousands of companies. What were the odds she'd end up at mine? I clicked on the email, and my coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. Dear Sarah, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to personally reach out to introduce myself as Hartwell Insurance Group's new facilities manager. I officially started yesterday, and am excited to be part of such a wonderful organization. I look forward to working with you and ensuring all your workplace needs are met. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or concerns. Best regards, Jessica Mitchell, Facilities Manager. The professional tone didn't fool me. I knew Jessica well enough to recognize the calculated sweetness underneath. We'd met exactly 3 times during the divorce proceedings, and each encounter had been a masterclass in passive aggression wrapped in a smile. She was younger than me, blonde where I was brunette, bubbly where I was reserved, and everything Kevin apparently decided he wanted instead of the woman who'd supported him through law school. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend Marcus in IT. Did you see the new facilities manager started yesterday? Heard she's married to some lawyer named Mitchell. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Wait, isn't that your ex's last name? I stared at the message, my stomach dropping. Marcus didn't know the whole story about my divorce, just that it had been messy and expensive. Most of my coworkers knew I was divorced and had a daughter, but I'd kept the details private. Professional Sarah and personal Sarah existed in separate worlds, and I'd worked hard to keep it that way. Yeah, that's her, I typed back, then deleted it. Same last name, different person, I wrote instead, which was technically true, and completely misleading. The morning dragged by in a haze of routine tasks that felt anything but routine. Every time someone walked past my office, I looked up expecting to see Jessica's perfectly styled blonde hair, and that smile that never quite reached her eyes, but she didn't appear, and by lunch I'd almost convinced myself I was overreacting. So what if my ex-husband's new wife worked at my company? Denver wasn't that big, and coincidences happened. We could be professional adults about this. That optimism lasted exactly until 2:15, when Jessica knocked on my office door. Sarah, so wonderful to see you again. She stood in my doorway wearing a crisp navy dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, holding a tablet and wearing that same calculated smile I remembered from the mediation sessions. I hope you don't mind me dropping by. I'm doing facility assessments for all departments this week. I forced my professional mask into place. Of course, come in. Congratulations on the new position. Jessica stepped into my office, and I watched her eyes catalog everything. The family photo of Emma and me at Red Rocks, the small succulent on my windowsill, the stack of campaign proposals on my desk. She lingered on the photo and something flickered across her face that might have been curiosity or calculation. What a lovely space, she said, though her tone suggested the opposite. Great natural light, must be nice having a window. It is, I agreed, unsure where this was heading. Jessica made notes on her tablet, then looked around again. You know, I've been reviewing the office assignments, and there are some inefficiencies in how we're utilizing our space. Some departments are spread out when they could be consolidated, and other areas are underutilized. She paused, meeting my eye. I'm sure you understand the importance of maximizing our resources. Warning bells started ringing in my head, but I kept my voice neutral. Absolutely. Efficiency is important. I'm so glad you feel that way. Jessica's smile widened. Because I'm going to be making some adjustments over the next few weeks to better serve everyone's needs. Nothing dramatic, just some reorganization to make sure we're all in the right places. She left without specifying what those adjustments might be, but the threat hung in the air like expensive perfume. I sat back in my chair staring at the door she'd closed behind her, and felt the first tremor of real fear. Jessica had power here, real power over my daily working life, and she'd just let me know she wasn't above using it. I tried to focus on work for the rest of the afternoon, but concentration felt impossible. Every email notification made me jump, and every footstep in the hallway had me looking toward my door. When 5 o'clock finally arrived, I packed up my things with the strange feeling that I was saying goodbye to something, though I couldn't say what. The drive to pick up Emma from aftercare gave me time to think, and none of my thoughts were good. Kevin had to know about Jessica's new job. Had he encouraged her to apply here? Was this some kind of coordinated effort to mess with my life, or just Jessica's solo mission? Either way, the woman who'd helped destroy my marriage now had the authority to make my work life miserable, and there wasn't much I could do about it. Emma bounced into the car full of stories about her day, and I forced myself to focus on her chatter about math tests and playground drama. She was my priority, my reason for staying strong, and I couldn't let Jessica's presence at Hartwell derail the stability I'd worked so hard to build. Whatever game she was playing, I'd find a way to handle it professionally and keep my job secure. But as I helped Emma with her homework that night, I couldn't shake the image of Jessica standing in my office, making notes on her tablet with that calculating look in her eye. She'd found a way into my sanctuary, the place where I'd rebuilt my confidence and my career, and something told me that facility assessment had nothing to do with efficiency and everything to do with revenge. The next morning, I arrived at work determined to act like nothing had changed. Jessica was just another coworker. This was just another day, and I was going to focus on the marketing campaign I'd been developing for our small business insurance line. I had meetings scheduled, deadlines to meet, and a professional reputation to maintain. That resolve lasted exactly until I opened my email and found the message that would change everything. The subject line was simple: office relocation, effective immediate. The sender was Jessica Mitchell, facilities manager, and as I read the contents, I felt my carefully constructed professional world begin to crumble. Dear Sarah, as part of our ongoing space optimization initiative, your office will be relocated to better accommodate departmental needs. Your new workspace has been prepared in the basement level, room B12, adjacent to our record storage area. This change will allow us to consolidate the marketing team in a more efficient configuration. Please pack your personal belongings and complete the transition by end of business today. Building maintenance will assist with moving your furniture and equipment tomorrow morning. If you have any questions about this transition, please feel free to contact me. Thank you for your cooperation in this improvement process. Best regards, Jessica Mitchell, Facilities Manager. I read the email 3 times, each pass making my hands shake more. The basement. She was moving me to the basement, away from my team, away from the natural light, away from everything that made my work environment bearable. And she was doing it under the guise of efficiency, wrapped in corporate speak that made it sound like a favor. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda, my direct supervisor. Just got a weird email about your office being moved. Did you request a relocation? Call me. I stared at the message, then at Jessica's email, then at the photo of Emma on my desk. This wasn't about space optimization or departmental efficiency. This was personal, calculated, and designed to humiliate. Jessica had been at Hartwell for exactly 3 days, and she was already using her position to wage war against the woman whose life she'd helped dismantle. But I had Emma to think about, bills to pay, and a career I couldn't afford to lose. So I started packing my personal belongings into the cardboard box I'd grabbed from the supply closet, each item feeling like a small surrender. The photo of Emma went in first, wrapped in a sweater to keep it safe. The succulent followed, though I doubted it would survive in a basement with no windows. As I packed, coworkers stopped by with confused questions and concerned looks. Why are you moving? Did you ask for this? Is everything okay? I gave them vague answers about departmental restructuring and smiled like it was no big deal, but inside, I was screaming. Because this wasn't just about an office. This was about Jessica making it clear that she could reach into every corner of my life, even the professional sanctuary I'd fought so hard to build. She had the power.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
She had the authority, and she had a personal vendetta that she was now free to pursue with corporate backing. As I carried my box toward the elevator that would take me to the basement, I caught a glimpse of Jessica through the glass walls of the conference room. She was in a meeting with other department heads, gesturing confidently with her hands, looking every inch the competent professional. She saw me walking past with my belongings, and smiled, a quick flash of satisfaction that she probably thought no one else would notice. But I noticed, and in that moment, staring at the woman who'd taken my husband and was now taking my office, I realized that this was only the beginning. Jessica had declared war, and she'd chosen her battlefield carefully. The question was, how long could I survive it? The basement of Hartwell Insurance Group was a place I'd visited exactly twice in my 3 years with the company, both times to retrieve archived files from storage. It smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and something faintly metallic, probably from the pipes that ran along the ceiling like mechanical veins. The fluorescent lights buzzed with an irregular rhythm that would give anyone a headache within an hour, and the air felt thick and recycled, nothing like the fresh breeze that used to flow through my 8th floor window. Room B12 sat at the end of a narrow hallway, squeezed between the record storage area and what appeared to be a utility closet. The nameplate on the door was a temporary paper printout that read Sarah Mitchell Marketing in generic Arial font, a far cry from the professional brass nameplate I'd earned upstairs. When I pushed open the door, I discovered my new reality, a windowless rectangle barely large enough for a desk, chair, and small bookshelf. The walls were painted institutional beige, and the carpet was that commercial gray that showed every footprint and coffee stain. Someone, probably building maintenance under Jessica's direction, had moved my desk and computer down here overnight. My monitor sat askew on the cramped surface, and my chair was pushed so close to the wall that I had to shimmy sideways to sit down. The Wi-Fi signal was weak enough that my laptop took 3 attempts to connect, and when it finally did, pages loaded with the enthusiasm of dial-up internet from night. I set down my box of personal items and tried to arrange them in a way that might make this cave feel like a workspace. The photo of Emma went on the desk, but the overhead lighting cast harsh shadows across her face, making even her bright smile look dim. My succulent went on the bookshelf, though I suspected it would be dead within a week without natural light. The motivational calendar I'd kept on my old desk looked ridiculous in here, its cheerful messages about achieving your dreams, mocking me from the beige wall. The worst part wasn't the physical discomfort or even the isolation, it was the symbolism. Jessica had literally buried me, moving me as far from the main operations as possible while keeping me technically employed. I was still a senior marketing coordinator, still drawing the same salary, still expected to produce the same quality work. But now I was doing it from a hole in the ground where visiting colleagues would have to make a special trip to find me, where I'd miss the impromptu conversations and collaborative moments that made marketing effective. My phone rang, the sound echoing strangely in the small space. Amanda's name appeared on the screen, and I answered with forced cheerfulness. "Hey Amanda, good morning. Sarah, what the hell is going on? I just came to your office to discuss the Morrison campaign, and you're gone." "The new girl, what's her name?" "Jessica. She says you requested a relocation for better focus. That doesn't sound like you at all." I looked around my concrete tomb and chose my words carefully. There was a departmental restructuring decision. "I'm getting settled in the new space now." "The basement, Sarah. She moved you to the basement." When I asked her about it, she gave me some speech about optimizing workflow and reducing distractions, but this feels wrong. "Did you actually request this?" The question hung in the air, and I found myself at a crossroads. I could tell Amanda the truth, explain that my ex-husband's vindictive new wife was using her facilities management position to wage personal war against me. But that would mean admitting my personal life had invaded my professional world, potentially making me look unprofessional or creating workplace drama that could reflect poorly on my judgment. Or I could swallow my pride, pretend this was a normal business decision, and hope I could find a way to handle Jessica without involving my supervisor. "It's fine, Amanda, just an adjustment period. The important thing is that I can still do my job effectively." She paused and I could hear the doubt in her silence. "Okay, but this feels off to me. If you need anything, or if there are issues with your ability to collaborate with the team from down there, let me know immediately." After she hung up, I sat in my basement office staring at my computer screen, trying to focus on the Morrison campaign material. The insurance agency was a family-owned business that wanted to expand their customer base among young professionals, and I'd been developing a digital marketing strategy that emphasized trust and reliability. The irony wasn't lost on me as I worked on messaging about stability and security while sitting in professional exile. The morning crawled by with the speed of bureaucratic paperwork. Every task took longer than usual because of the poor internet connection, and the isolation was already affecting my productivity. Normally I'd walk down the hall to discuss ideas with colleagues, pop into Amanda's office for quick approvals, or catch Marcus in the break room for informal IT support. Now each interaction required a phone call or email, creating barriers where none had existed before. Around 11, I heard footsteps in the hallway and hoped someone was coming to check on me. Instead, the footsteps stopped at the records storage room next door, followed by the sound of boxes being moved around. The walls were thin enough that I could hear everything: conversations, phone calls, even the rustle of papers. Privacy, like natural light, was apparently a luxury not available in the basement. Lunch was an adventure in navigation. The basement had no break room, no coffee station, no microwave. I had to ride the elevator up 6 floors to reach the main employee kitchen, heat up my leftover pasta under the curious stares of colleagues who didn't expect to see me there, then ride back down to eat alone in my cave. The round trip took 25 minutes, turning my usual 30-minute lunch break into an exhausting expedition. When I returned to my desk, I found an email from Jessica waiting for me. The subject line read, "Welcome to your new workspace," and my stomach clenched before I even opened it. "Hi Sarah, I hope your first day in the new office is going smoothly. I wanted to personally check in and make sure you have everything you need to be productive in your new environment. As you know, the basement level offers several advantages. minimal distractions, quiet atmosphere for concentrated work, and proximity to our filing systems for easy research access. I've also arranged for enhanced security measures in this area, so you'll need to badge in and out for access. Your security permissions have been updated accordingly. Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns about your new workspace. I'm committed to ensuring all our employees have the tools they need to succeed. Best wishes, Jessica. Enhanced security measure. I read that phrase 3 times before the implications sank in. She was restricting my access to parts of the building, making it harder for me to move freely between floors or departments. The badge requirement was supposedly for security, but in practice it meant Jessica or building security could track my movements throughout the workday. I tested this new reality immediately by trying to visit Marcus in IT on the 6th floor. Sure enough, when I badged out of the basement and rode the elevator up, my keycard wouldn't grant me access to the IT department. I had to call Marcus from the hallway and ask him to come out and meet me, which created the awkward situation of having a work conversation in public, while other employees walked past and wondered why I couldn't just go into his office like a normal person. "This is ridiculous," Marcus said after I explained my new access limitations. "You need to talk to IT support constantly for the marketing campaigns. How are we supposed to collaborate if you can't even get into my department?" "I'll figure it out," I said, though I had no idea. "Sarah, this doesn't make sense from any business perspective. Who made this decision?" I looked at my friend, this kind, logical man who'd never been through a messy divorce, or dealt with someone using institutional power for personal vendetta. How could I explain that my professional life was being systematically dismantled by a woman who saw me as a threat to her marriage? How could I make him understand that Jessica's decisions had nothing to do with business logic and everything to do with making my daily existence as difficult as possible? "It's complicated," I said finally, "but I need to handle it through proper channels." The rest of the afternoon brought a parade of small humiliations and practical difficulties. My computer crashed twice, probably due to the building's older electrical systems in the basement. When I called IT support, they had to schedule a service appointment, because technicians needed special access to reach my floor. The appointment wouldn't be available until the following week, leaving me with a computer that froze every 20 minutes. Around 3 o'clock I heard familiar voices in the hallway and looked up to see 2 of my marketing colleagues, Jennifer and Mike, walking toward the record storage room with confused expressions. They were looking for archived campaign materials from 2019, and their conversation was clearly audible through my thin office wall. "God, it's depressing down here," Jennifer said. "How is Sarah supposed to work in this dungeon? Did you see her off?" "It's smaller than my bathroom at home," Mike replied. "What did she do to deserve this?" "I heard it was a facilities management decision, something about workflow optimization. That's corporate speak for we wanted to screw someone over but needed a professional excuse." Their voices faded as they moved deeper into the storage area, but their words stayed with me. My colleagues could see what was happening, even if they didn't know the personal dynamics behind it. Jessica's actions were so transparently vindictive that other people were questioning the business justification, but that didn't change my reality. I was still trapped in the basement, still isolated from my team, still subject to the whims of a woman who had every reason to want me gone. The day ended with another email from Jessica, this one announcing new protocols for basement access. All employees working in the lower level would need to submit daily activity reports to facilities management, supposedly for security and efficiency tracking. The reports were due by 5:30 each day, and should include detailed descriptions of tasks completed, time spent on each project, and any interactions with other departments. I stared at the email until the words blurred together. Jessica was creating a paper trail, documenting my every move and requiring me to account for my time in ways that no other employee had to endure. If I missed a deadline, forgot to file a report, or didn't provide sufficient detail, she'd have written evidence of my supposed professional shortcomings. She was building a case against me, one bureaucratic requirement at a time. That evening, as I drove to pick up Emma from Kevin's house for my custody week, I tried to push down the growing panic in my chest. This was my ex-husband's new wife systematically destroying my career, and there seemed to be no recourse that wouldn't make me look unprofessional or vindictive myself. How do you explain to HR that your facilities manager is harassing you when everything she's doing can be justified as legitimate business decisions? How do you prove personal motivation when every action is wrapped in corporate policy? Kevin answered the door with his usual awkward smile, the expression of a man who knew our interactions were necessary but uncomfortable. Hey Sarah, Emma's just finishing her homework. How's the new job going? The casual question hit me like a slap. Of course Jessica had told him about her position at Hartwell. They probably discussed it over dinner, maybe even laughed about the coincidence of her ending up at my company. Did he know about the office relocation? Had she shared the details of her systematic campaign to make my life miserable? It's fine, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Different, but fine. Emma bounded to the door with her backpack, chattering about a science project on volcano. I hugged her tight, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo and letting her innocent energy wash away some of the day's toxicity. Whatever game Jessica was playing, Emma couldn't be collateral damage. I had to find a way to handle this situation without it affecting my daughter or my ability to provide for her. During the drive home, Emma asked why I seemed sad, and I realized I was failing at hiding my stress. She was 8 years old and perceptive, already dealing with the complexities of divorced parents and shared custody. The last thing she needed was to worry about her mom's workplace problems on top of everything else. Just a busy day at work, sweetie. Nothing for you to worry about. Is your new office nice? Dad said. Jessica got a job at your company. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Kevin had told Emma about Jessica's new position, which meant my daughter now knew about this connection between her parents' professional lives. How much had he shared? Did Emma know that Jessica had moved my office, or was that detail still private? She did get a job there. It's a big company, so we might not see each other much. Emma seemed satisfied with that answer, but I wondered how long I could maintain the fiction that everything was normal. Children are intuitive about adult stress, and if Jessica's harassment continued escalating, Emma would eventually notice the impact on my mood and behavior. That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and tried to develop a strategy. I could document everything Jessica was doing, create my own paper trail to counter hers. I could speak with Amanda about the impact on my productivity and collaboration. I could reach out to HR and express concerns about the workplace changes, though I'd have to be careful not to make accusations I couldn't prove. But every option felt insufficient against Jessica's calculated approach. She had legitimate authority over facilities management, and everything she'd done so far could be defended as business decisions. Moving my office could be justified as space optimization. Restricting my access could be explained as security measures. The daily reports could be positioned as efficiency improvements. She was covering her tracks professionally, while making my life progressively more difficult. My phone buzzed with a text message, and my heart stopped when I saw Jessica's name on the screen. Hi Sarah, hope your first day in the new office went well. Kevin mentioned that Emma has a science fair coming up. Maybe we could help her with her volcano project this weekend. It would be so nice to spend more time together as a family. Let me know if you'd like me to pick up supplies when I'm out shopping tomorrow. I read the message 3 times, each pass making my hands shake harder. Jessica was inserting herself into my relationship with Emma, positioning herself as a helpful stepmother who wanted to be involved in family activity. But the subtext was clear. She had access to information about my daughter through Kevin, and she was letting me know that my personal life wasn't off limits to her interference. The worst part was that the message was perfectly reasonable on its surface. A new stepmother wanting to help with a school project, offering to contribute time and resources to support Emma's education. If I objected or seemed resistant, I'd look petty and territorial. Jessica was forcing me into a position where any negative response would make me appear to be the problem. I set down my phone without responding, and stared out my kitchen window at the quiet suburban street. Jessica had been at Hartwell Insurance for less than a week, and she'd already moved me to the basement, restricted my building access, implemented special reporting requirements, and was now reaching into my parenting responsibility.
Her campaign was comprehensive and escalating, designed to destabilize every aspect of my life. But I wasn't the same woman who'd fallen apart during my divorce.
I'd survived Kevin's betrayal, the humiliation of discovering his affair, the financial devastation of legal fees and property division. I'd rebuilt my career, created a stable home for Emma, and learned to stand on my own feet. Jessica might have caught me off guard with her sudden appearance at my company, but she'd underestimated my resilience. Tomorrow, I decided, I would start fighting back, not with emotional outbursts or dramatic confrontations, but with the same calculated professionalism Jessica was using against me. I would document everything, build my own case, and find allies within Hartwell who could see through her facade. She wanted to play corporate warfare? Fine. But she was about to discover that the woman she was trying to destroy had already survived worse and come out stronger. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood as I descended into the basement for day 2 of my professional exile. The fluorescent lights seemed even more aggressive today, casting harsh shadows that made everything look sickly and washed out. My computer, still plagued by technical issues, greeted me with a blue screen of death that required 3 restarts before it grudgingly came to life. I spent the first hour of my day documenting yesterday's events in a private email draft, noting timestamps, witnesses, and the specific language Jessica had used in her communications. If this situation continued escalating, I wanted a detailed record that couldn't be disputed or dismissed as emotional overreaction. Around 9 o'clock, I heard multiple sets of footsteps in the hallway, followed by voices I didn't recognize. Apparently, the basement was becoming a hub of activity under Jessica's management. Through my thin walls, I could hear discussions about storage optimization, security protocols, and workflow improvement. Jessica's voice was prominent among them, confident and authoritative as she explained her vision for maximizing the basement's potential. "This area has been underutilized for too long," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the wall. "With proper organization and strategic placement of personnel, we can create a much more efficient operation down here." Strategic placement of personnel. The phrase made my skin crawl because I was obviously part of that strategic placement, moved down here not for efficiency but for isolation. Jessica was building something in the basement, some kind of expanded operations center, and I was apparently going to be the guinea pig for her experiment in workplace control. My phone rang, interrupting my eavesdrop. Amanda's name appeared on the screen, and I answered with relief at hearing from someone from my actual department. "Sarah, I need you up here for the Morrison presentation review. Can you come to conference room A in 10 minutes? "Of course," I said, then hesitated. "Actually, let me check if I can access that floor with my new badge restrictions." "What do you mean, badge restrictions?" I explained the access limitations Jessica had implemented, and Amanda's silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. "That's ridiculous," she finally said. "You're a senior coordinator who needs to collaborate with multiple departments daily. How are you supposed to do your job if you can't access the building?" "I'm trying to work through the proper channels to resolve it. No, I'm calling Jessica right now. This is interfering with legitimate business operations." After Amanda hung up, I sat in my basement office feeling both grateful for her support and worried about the consequences of her intervention. Jessica had been careful to make her actions appear professionally justified, but now my supervisor was questioning those decisions directly. That could either lead to a resolution of my access problems or escalate Jessica's retaliation to a new level. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Hi Sarah, I understand there was some confusion about your building access. I've temporarily expanded your permissions for today's meeting, but we'll need to discuss permanent solutions that balance your work needs with our security protocols. Please stop by my office after your meeting so we can find a workable compromise." The message was professionally worded but felt like a trap. Jessica was positioning herself as the reasonable party trying to find solutions, while simultaneously making it clear that my access to the building was subject to her approval and could be revoked at any time. She was also requiring me to come to her office, putting me in the position of supplicant, asking for favors. The Morrison presentation review went smoothly, though I noticed curious looks from colleagues who weren't used to seeing me emerge from the basement like some kind of corporate mole person. My contributions to the discussion were solid, and Amanda made a point of emphasizing my key role in developing the campaign strategy, which felt like both professional validation and a subtle message to anyone questioning my value to the company. But the meeting also highlighted how much my isolation was already affecting my work. I'd missed 3 informal conversations about client feedback that had happened organically in the hallway outside my old office. I was out of the loop on small but important updates about budget adjustments and timeline changes. The basement might be quiet and distraction-free, as Jessica had claimed, but it was also cutting me off from the collaborative energy that made marketing effective. After the meeting, I made the trek to Jessica's office on the 2nd floor, my stomach churning with each step. Her space was everything mine wasn't. Large, well-lit, decorated with plants and professional artwork. She'd managed to secure a corner office with windows on 2 sides, and her desk was positioned to command a view of both the hallway and the parking lot. Power positioning at its finest. "Sarah, thank you for coming up. Please, have a seat." Jessica gestured to a chair positioned directly across from her desk, forcing me to look up at her slightly due to the height difference. Another power play that probably seemed natural to casual observers, but felt calculated to someone who understood the dynamics at work. "I want to apologize for any inconvenience with the access restrictions," she continued, her tone warm and professional. "Security protocols can sometimes create unintended barriers to productivity, and that's certainly not our goal here." I waited for her to continue, not trusting myself to speak without revealing my growing anger. "I've been thinking about solutions that could work for everyone," Jessica said, consulting notes on her tablet. "What if we set up scheduled access periods for your collaboration needs? You could request advance permission for meetings or department visits, and we could ensure your badge works during those specific timeframes." The proposal was even worse than the current restriction. She was suggesting that I ask permission for basic work activities, treating me like a child who needed supervised access to the building where I'd worked successfully for 3 years. The bureaucratic hoops would be humiliating and time-consuming, and they'd give Jessica complete control over my professional movements. "That seems unnecessarily complicated," I said carefully. "My role requires frequent collaboration with multiple departments, often on short notice. Scheduling access in advance would significantly impact my productivity." Jessica nodded thoughtfully as if genuinely considering my concerns. "I understand the challenge, but we have to balance individual convenience with overall security and efficiency. Maybe we could start with a trial period of the scheduled access system and adjust based on how well it works in practice." Or I said, finding my voice, "We could simply restore my previous access level, which allowed me to do my job effectively without any security issues for the past 3 years. Jessica's smile flickered almost imperceptibly. "Unfortunately, the basement security upgrade requires different protocols. All employees working in that area are subject to the same restrictions." "What other employees are working in the basement?" The question hung in the air for a moment too long. We both knew I was the only person assigned to an office down there, which meant the security protocols were specifically designed around my presence. "Well, currently you're the primary occupant, but we're planning to expand operations in that area. These protocols will apply to everyone working in the lower level." It was a non-answer wrapped in corporate speak, and we both knew it. Jessica was creating policies specifically to control my movements, then justifying them as general security measures for an expansion that might never happen. "I'll need to discuss this with my supervisor," I said, standing to leave. "Of course, Amanda and I will need to coordinate on any solutions to make sure they work for everyone." Jessica's smile was back to full brightness. "I'm sure we can find an arrangement that serves all our needs." As I walked back toward the elevator, Jessica's final comment echoed in my mind. She was already planning to involve Amanda in her bureaucratic games, which meant my supervisor would be pulled into the personal drama I'd been trying to keep separate from my professional life. Jessica was systematically removing my options for handling this quietly or independently. The elevator ride back to the basement felt like descending into a prison I'd helped build through my own attempts to be professional and reasonable. Every choice I'd made to handle Jessica's harassment through proper channels had given her more opportunities to tighten her control and legitimize her actions through corporate policy. That afternoon brought a new torture: Jessica's promised expansion of basement operations. Workers arrived to install additional lighting and electrical outlets in the hallway outside my office, creating a constant stream of noise that made concentration impossible. The drilling and hammering echoed through the concrete walls, and the smell of electrical work mixed with paint fumes to create an atmosphere that felt genuinely unhealthy. When I called building maintenance to ask about the timeline for the construction, they told me the work would continue for at least 2 weeks, and possibly longer depending on the scope of Jessica's renovation plan. 2 weeks of 8-hour workdays in a construction zone, with no option to relocate temporarily because my basement office was supposedly a permanent assignment. By 4 o'clock my head was pounding from the noise and fumes, and my computer had crashed twice more due to power fluctuations from the electrical work. I'd accomplished perhaps 2 hours of actual work in an 8-hour day, and I still had Jessica's daily activity report to complete before 5:30. The report format was even more intrusive than I'd expected. Jessica wanted detailed descriptions of every task, including timestamps, resources used, and collaboration partners. She wanted explanations for any time spent away from my desk, including breaks, meetings, and phone calls. She wanted a summary of my productivity level and any factors that had impacted my work efficiency. I stared at the form, realizing that Jessica was creating a comprehensive record of my every professional move. If I reported honestly about the construction disruptions, computer problems, and access limitations, it would document the negative impact of her decisions on my productivity. But if I didn't report honestly, she could use that as evidence of my dishonesty or lack of attention to detail. Either way, she was building a case against me, one daily report at a time, and the most frustrating part was that everything she was doing could be defended as legitimate business practice if anyone questioned her method. As I filled out the humiliating report, documenting my struggles with basic work functions that had never been problems before, I heard Jessica's voice in the hallway again. She was talking to someone about performance monitoring and accountability measures for basement-level employees. Her tone was authoritative and confident, the voice of someone who knew exactly what she was doing and felt completely justified in doing it. I submitted my report at 5:28, 2 minutes before the deadline, and packed up my few belongings for the day. As I waited for the elevator, I caught a glimpse of Jessica through the stairwell window, climbing confidently toward the upper floors where real work happened, in offices with windows and breathable air. The woman who destroyed my marriage was now systematically destroying my career, using corporate policies and professional language to wage personal war. She had the power, the position, and the apparent patience to make my life progressively more miserable until I either quit or gave her enough documented reasons to justify firing me. But as I rode the elevator up from my basement prison, I felt something shifting inside me. The fear and confusion of the past few days were hardening into something more dangerous: determination. Jessica thought she was dealing with the same broken woman who'd fallen apart during the divorce, but she was wrong. I'd learned how to fight during those dark months, how to survive when everything seemed hopeless, and how to rebuild from nothing. She wanted to play corporate warfare, fine, but she was about to discover that she'd underestimated her opponent, and that sometimes the person you try to bury has been learning how to claw their way back to the surface. The construction noise reached unbearable levels the following Wednesday when Jessica decided the basement needed new ventilation systems. Industrial fans roared to life at 7 in the morning, drowning out phone calls and making it impossible to concentrate on anything requiring actual thought. When I called the main office to report the disruption, I was told to contact facilities management directly. Of course, Jessica answered her phone on the first ring, her voice bright and helpful. "Sarah, I was just thinking about you. How are you adjusting to the improvements we're making down there? The noise is making it impossible to work," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I can't take calls or focus on my projects with industrial equipment running constantly." "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. The ventilation upgrade is essential for health and safety compliance in the basement workspace. I know it's disruptive temporarily, but the improved air quality will make your environment so much better in the long run." Health and safety compliance. Another perfectly reasonable justification for making my life miserable. I couldn't argue against worker safety measures without sounding unreasonable, even though the timing felt suspiciously targeted. "How long will this continue?" "The contractor estimates another week," possibly 2 depending on how complex the installation becomes. But don't worry, we're monitoring the situation closely to minimize disruption to your productivity. After she hung up, I sat in my vibrating office chair, listening to the mechanical roar that would apparently be my soundtrack for the next 2 weeks. The irony of improved air quality wasn't lost on me when I was slowly suffocating under the weight of Jessica's systematic harassment campaign. By noon, I'd developed a splitting headache that no amount of ibuprofen could touch. The ventilation fans created a low-frequency hum that seemed to resonate in my bones, and the fluorescent lights flickering in rhythm with the electrical load made my vision swim. When Amanda called for a status update on the Morrison campaign, I had to ask her to repeat herself 3 times because I couldn't hear over the industrial symphony surrounding me. "Sarah, this is ridiculous. You can't work in these conditions. Jessica says it's temporary for safety compliance." Safety compliance my ass, this is harassment, and I'm calling HR. My stomach dropped. "Amanda, please don't. Let me handle this through proper channels first." "What proper channel? You've been buried in the basement for a week. They've restricted your building access, and now they're torturing you with construction noise. This isn't normal business operation." She was right, but I wasn't ready for the nuclear option of involving HR in what would inevitably become a he-said-she-said situation about personal motivations and workplace policy. Jessica had been careful to make everything appear legitimate, and I didn't have concrete proof that her decisions were personally motivated rather than business-driven. "Give me another week," I pleaded. "If things don't improve, then we'll escalate." Amanda agreed reluctantly, but I could hear the frustration in her voice. She was watching a valued employee being systematically degraded, and her hands were tied by corporate hierarchy and proper procedure protocols. That afternoon brought a new humiliation. Jessica sent a company-wide email announcing the basement renovations and asking for volunteers to help with temporary workflow adjustments while construction was ongoing. The email positioned the situation as a collaborative effort to improve facilities, with my basement exile described as a pilot program for distributed work environments. Within an hour, 3 colleagues had stopped by my dungeon to offer sympathy and support. Their kindness was genuine, but their presence highlighted how abnormal my situation had become. People were making special trips to check on me like I was some kind of workplace casualty, and their concerned expressions made it clear that everyone could see what was happening even if they didn't understand the personal dynamics behind it. Jennifer from marketing brought me a plant that supposedly thrived in low-light conditions. "I thought this might brighten up your space a little," she said, looking around my concrete cave with poorly disguised horror. Mike from the creative team delivered a box of good coffee and a French press. "The coffee down here is terrible," he explained. "This should help you survive until you get back upstairs." Until you get back upstairs. The phrase hung in the air between us, acknowledgement that everyone expected this situation to be temporary because permanent basement exile wasn't something that happened to competent employees at functional companies. But Jessica wasn't done with her improvement. Thursday morning brought painters who needed to coat the basement walls with some kind of special sealant that smelled like industrial-strength nail polish remover. The fumes were so strong that I started feeling dizzy within an hour, and by lunch I was genuinely nauseous. When I called Jessica to report the health hazard, she expressed immediate concern and suggested I take the afternoon off as sick leave. "Your health is our top priority, Sarah. We can't have you working in unsafe conditions." The offer was a trap disguised as consideration. Taking sick leave would use up my limited PTO days and could be documented as a pattern of absenteeism if Jessica decided to build a case about my reliability. But staying in the basement with toxic fumes wasn't really an option either, especially when my head was pounding and my vision was starting to blur. I chose a third option and worked from the main floor lobby for the rest of the day, setting up my laptop at a table near the coffee shop where the Wi-Fi was strong and the air was breathable. It wasn't ideal for confidential work, but it allowed me to maintain productivity while avoiding both the toxic basement and the sick leave trap. Jessica found me there around 4 o'clock, her expression a perfect mixture of concern and gentle reproof. "Sarah, I'm so glad you found a solution that works for you, though I do want to make sure we're maintaining appropriate security protocols for sensitive work materials." "Security protocols? Of course, she was politely suggesting that working in the public lobby might violate company confidentiality policies, which would give her another angle to criticize my judgment or work practices. I'm only handling non-confidential projects today, I replied, nothing that requires secure access. That's probably wise. We should discuss a more permanent solution for days when the basement conditions aren't suitable. Maybe we could arrange temporary workspace assignments on other floors when needed. The suggestion sounded helpful, but I recognized the underlying control mechanism. Jessica was positioning herself as the gatekeeper for my ability to work in habitable conditions, requiring me to ask permission and justify my needs. Every time the basement became unbearable, Friday morning brought what felt like the final insult of the week. I arrived at my basement office to find a new nameplate on the door, but instead of my name, it read, Temporary Workspace Facilities Management. My actual nameplate was nowhere to be found, and my belongings had been moved to accommodate a second desk that now occupied half of my already cramped space. A sticky note on my computer monitor explained that I would be sharing the office with rotating facilities staff, while the upper-level offices underwent their own maintenance cycles. The note was signed with Jessica's initials and included a schedule showing different workers assigned to my desk on various days throughout the coming weeks. I stared at the schedule, feeling the last of my professional dignity crumble. Jessica had turned my office into a temporary workspace for maintenance staff, reducing my status to that of a transient occupant who had to share space with whoever needed a place to eat lunch or fill out paperwork. The symbolism was devastating and deliberate. My phone buzzed with a text from Kevin. Emma is excited about the science fair next week. Jessica picked up all the supplies for her volcano project, and they're planning to work on it this weekend. Thanks for being flexible about the schedule change. I looked at my phone in confusion, then checked my calendar app. Emma was supposed to be with me this weekend, but apparently Kevin and Jessica had made other arrangements without consulting me. The volcano project I was supposed to help with had become Jessica's opportunity to play involved stepmother while pushing me further out of my daughter's activities. I called Kevin immediately, not caring that I was making personal calls during work hours from my shared basement office. Hey Sarah, what's up? What's this about a schedule change? Emma is supposed to be with me this weekend. Oh right, Jessica thought it would be easier to work on the science project at our house since she already bought all the supplies. Emma seemed excited about the plan, so I figured it would be okay. You figured it would be okay to change our custody arrangement without asking me. It's just one weekend, Sarah, and Jessica is really excited about helping with the project. She's been researching volcano designs online all week. The casual dismissal of my parenting time stung almost as much as the implication that Jessica was more prepared to help Emma than I was. Kevin was rewriting our agreements to accommodate his new wife's desires, and Emma was caught in the middle of adult power games she couldn't possibly understand. This isn't about the project, Kevin. It's about maintaining the custody schedule we agreed on. Look, I don't want to fight about this. Emma is happy with the arrangement, and Jessica has put a lot of effort into planning activities. Can't we just be flexible for once? Flexible, the word that divorced parents used when they wanted to change agreements in their favor while making the other parent seem rigid and unreasonable for insisting on established boundaries. If Jessica wants to help with school projects, she can do that during your regular custody time. Fine, but Emma is going to be disappointed. She was really looking forward to this weekend. The conversation ended with Emma being disappointed, according to Kevin, because I insisted on following our custody agreement instead of accommodating Jessica's desire to play supermom. I was being positioned as the inflexible biological mother who prioritized legal documents over my daughter's happiness. The irony was crushing. Jessica was simultaneously destroying my professional life and inserting herself into my role as Emma's mother, while I was supposed to be grateful for her involvement and flexible about the boundaries that protected my relationship with my daughter. That afternoon, as I packed up my belongings in the shared basement office, I realized that Jessica's campaign had expanded beyond workplace harassment. She was systematically targeting every aspect of my life, my career, my financial stability, my parenting time, and my relationship with Emma. She wasn't just trying to make me quit my job, she was trying to replace me entirely. The weekend with Emma became a careful balance of normal mother-daughter activities and gentle fact-finding about Jessica's growing presence in her life. We made pancakes Saturday morning, went to the park, and worked on homework together, but underneath the routine normalcy, I was trying to understand how much influence Jessica was gaining, and whether Emma was being manipulated or genuinely bonding with her stepmother. Dad says Jessica is really good at science, Emma mentioned while we were working on her math homework. She used to be a teacher before she worked at stores. Jessica had been a teacher. That explained her systematic approach to workplace harassment and her understanding of how to build documented cases against people. She knew how to use institutional authority, how to create paper trails, and how to make personal attacks look like professional concerns. That's nice, sweetheart. Are you excited about your volcano project? Yeah, but I kind of wanted to work on it with you too. Jessica bought all the supplies, but maybe we could make another volcano just for fun. My heart broke a little at Emma's diplomatic solution. She was 8 years old, and already navigating the complex dynamics between her parents and stepmother, trying to include everyone while managing adult emotions she shouldn't have to consider. We can absolutely make our own volcano, I assured her. Science is always more fun when you get to experiment. Sunday evening, as I prepared to take Emma back to Kevin's house, I felt the weight of the week settling on my shoulder. Monday would bring another week in the basement, more construction noise, more shared workspace humiliations, and whatever new torments Jessica had planned for my professional existence. But something had changed over the weekend. Watching Emma navigate the complex family dynamics with grace and resilience reminded me that I'd survived much worse than workplace harassment. I'd rebuilt my life once after my marriage collapsed, created a stable home for my daughter, and established myself professionally despite starting over from nothing. Jessica might have the upper hand right now, but she'd made a crucial mistake. She'd assumed that isolating me would make me weaker, that professional degradation would break my spirit, and that systematic harassment would eventually force me to quit. But isolation had given me time to think, degradation had reminded me of my own strength, and harassment had clarified exactly what I was fighting for. Monday morning arrived with another email from Jessica, this one announcing new productivity metrics for basement-level employees. All workers in the lower level would be subject to enhanced performance monitoring, including keystroke logging, time tracking software, and periodic productivity assessments. I stared at the email, realizing that Jessica was escalating her surveillance tactic. The daily activity reports hadn't been enough. Now she wanted digital monitoring of my every keystroke and mouse click. She was creating a technological prison designed to document any decrease in my productivity that could be attributed to distraction, inefficiency, or lack of focus. But as I read the detailed requirements for the new monitoring system, I noticed something interesting. The email had been sent to a distribution list labeled basement staff, which currently included only my name and 2 maintenance workers who occasionally used the shared desk space. Jessica was implementing comprehensive surveillance technology for 3 people, 2 of whom were hourly employees who weren't subject to performance review.
The cost-benefit analysis didn't make sense from a business perspective, which meant Jessica was either terrible at facilities management, or she was creating policies specifically designed to monitor and control my work activities. Either way, the disproportionate focus on basement surveillance would be difficult to justify if anyone questioned the resource allocation. I forwarded the email to my personal account and began building my own documentation file. If Jessica wanted to monitor my productivity, she was going to discover that a woman fighting for her professional survival could be remarkably focused and efficient, even under the worst possible working conditions. The morning brought the installation of the monitoring software, administered by an IT technician who seemed confused about why such extensive surveillance was needed for a single marketing coordinator. This is usually reserved for employees on performance improvement plans, he mentioned while configuring the keystroke logging. Are you having productivity issues? Not that I'm aware of, I replied. This was requested by facilities management for security purposes. He looked around my basement cave with obvious skepticism. Security purposes for a marketing office in the basement. Okay, if you say so. The interaction reminded me that other employees were also noticing the unusual measures being taken around my work situation. The IT department would have records of the surveillance installation, the construction costs, and the access restriction modification. Jessica's actions were creating a trail of unusual expenses and policy exceptions that might eventually catch the attention of someone with authority to question her decisions. By noon, the keystroke monitoring felt like digital shackles. Every pause in my typing, every moment spent thinking or reading, was being recorded and analyzed. The time-tracking software demanded constant updates about my activities, and the productivity assessment tool measured my output against baseline metrics that seemed designed to highlight deficiencies rather than achievement. But I adapted, channeling my anger into focus and my frustration into productivity. If Jessica wanted metrics, I'd give her metrics that were beyond criticism. I documented every task, tracked every minute, and maintained output levels that would be difficult to challenge even under normal working conditions. The irony was that her surveillance tactics were actually making me more efficient in some way. The constant monitoring forced me to eliminate time-wasting activities and focus intensely on measurable outcomes. If she was building a case against my productivity, she was going to discover that a highly motivated employee under surveillance could achieve remarkable results. That afternoon brought visitors to my basement office. Robert Hartwell himself, the company's CEO, accompanied by Linda Washington from HR, appeared in my doorway looking like explorers who'd discovered an unknown civilization in the building's lower depths. "Sarah, good to see you," Mr. Hartwell said, though his expression suggested confusion about why he was seeing me in a basement cave instead of the marketing department. "We're conducting facility tours as part of our quarterly assessment. How are you finding the new workspace?" The question was loaded with opportunity and danger. I could smile and pretend everything was fine, maintaining professional appearances while allowing Jessica's harassment to continue unchecked, or I could be honest about the working conditions and risk appearing to complain or create drama. "It's quite different from my previous office," I said carefully. "The environment takes some adjustment." Linda Washington looked around the cramped space, noting the flickering lights, the shared desk arrangement, and the industrial noise filtering through the wall. "What prompted the relocation to this area?" "Facilities management identified it as part of a space optimization initiative," I replied, using Jessica's own language to describe the decision. Mr. Hartwell frowned at the monitoring equipment visible on my computer screen. "That's quite a sophisticated surveillance setup for a marketing position. Is this standard for all employees?" "I believe it's part of enhanced productivity measures for basement-level staff," I said, again echoing Jessica's justification. The CEO and HR director exchanged glances that suggested they were hearing about these policies for the first time. The extensive surveillance, the isolated workspace, and the unusual security restrictions were apparently not part of any company-wide initiative they'd approved. "We'll need to review these procedures with facilities management," Linda said diplomatically. "Employee productivity measures should be consistent with company policy and applied equitably across departments." After they left, I sat in my basement office feeling the first stirrings of hope since this nightmare began. Senior leadership had witnessed my working conditions firsthand, and their questions suggested they were concerned about the policies Jessica had implemented. The CEO's confusion about the surveillance equipment and HR's comments about equitable application meant Jessica might finally be forced to justify her decisions to people with authority to overrule her. But I also knew that bringing leadership attention to my situation could backfire if Jessica was prepared with compelling justifications for her action. She'd been careful to frame everything as legitimate business decisions, and she might have documentation to support her claims about security needs and productivity requirements. The rest of the afternoon passed in tense anticipation, waiting to see how Jessica would respond to the unexpected executive visit. Around 4 o'clock, my phone rang with her name on the caller ID. "Sarah, I hope your meeting with Mr. Hartwell went well. I understand he and Linda were touring the basement facilities today." "Yes, they stopped by briefly. I wanted to give you a heads up that we'll be conducting a comprehensive review of the basement operations next week." Nothing to worry about, just standard evaluation procedures to ensure we're meeting all our goals for the expanded workspace program. Standard evaluation procedure. Jessica was positioning the executive attention as routine business assessment, rather than concerned inquiry about unusual policies. She was also giving me advance warning, which suggested she was confident in her ability to justify her decisions to senior leadership. "I'll make sure all my documentation is current," I said. "That's perfect. And Sarah, I really appreciate your patience with all the adjustments we've been making. Change is never easy, but I think we're building something really innovative down there." Building something innovative. Jessica was framing my professional exile as an exciting experimental program rather than systematic harassment. She'd be ready for any questions about resource allocation, policy exceptions, or unusual surveillance measures. As I ended the call, I realized that Jessica's confidence wasn't necessarily misplaced. She'd been methodical about creating legitimate justifications for her actions, and she had the authority to implement policies within her department. Unless senior leadership was prepared to question her competence or challenge her decision-making process, the executive visit might not change anything meaningful about my situation. But something had shifted in the power dynamic. Jessica felt the need to call and position the leadership visit as routine, which meant she was aware that her actions were attracting unwanted attention. The surveillance equipment and isolated workspace that had seemed like impenetrable walls were suddenly looking like potential evidence of overreach or poor management. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. Senior leadership had seen my working conditions, HR had raised questions about policy consistency, and Jessica was suddenly defensive about decisions she'd previously made with complete confidence. The battle wasn't over, but the battlefield had changed. And sometimes, when you're buried in the basement of corporate hierarchy, all you need is for someone with authority to notice that you're still breathing. The comprehensive review Jessica had promised arrived the following Monday in the form of an external consulting firm, specializing in workplace efficiency audit. 3 serious-looking professionals in expensive suits descended into my basement office with clipboards, measuring tapes, and air quality monitors, treating my professional exile like a fascinating case study in modern workspace innovation. Jessica accompanied them, playing the role of forward-thinking facilities manager who'd pioneered a revolutionary approach to employee productivity. She spoke about distributed work environments and enhanced focus protocols with the confidence of someone who genuinely believed her own narrative or had convinced herself that systematic harassment was actually brilliant management strategy. "The baseline productivity metrics show remarkable improvement," she explained to the lead consultant while gesturing toward my computer screen displaying the keystroke monitoring data. "By eliminating traditional office distractions and implementing targeted performance tracking, we've created an environment where employees can achieve unprecedented focus level." I sat at my cramped desk, pretending to work on campaign materials, while strangers discussed my professional life like I was a laboratory specimen. The lead consultant asked questions about employee satisfaction, stress levels, and long-term sustainability of the basement model, but Jessica had prepared responses for everything. "Employee adaptation has exceeded expectations," she said smoothly. "We've seen initial adjustment challenges, which is normal with any innovative approach, but overall engagement metrics are trending positively." I wondered what data she was using to support that claim, since my actual engagement with the company had plummeted to near zero levels. But Jessica had become expert at crafting corporate language that sounded impressive while meaning absolutely nothing. The consultant spent 2 hours measuring every aspect of my cave-like existence, from air circulation patterns to noise level variations throughout the day. They tested the Wi-Fi strength, evaluated the lighting quality, and even measured the ergonomic factors of my cramped workspace arrangement. Everything was documented with scientific precision, as if my suffering was data points in an important research project. When they finally left, Jessica lingered in my doorway with a satisfied expression that made my skin crawl. "I think that went very well, don't you?" The consultant seemed genuinely impressed with what we've accomplished down here. What we've accomplished, as if I'd been a willing participant in my own professional degradation, rather than the unwilling subject of her systematic campaign to destroy my career and mental health. The report should be ready by the end of the week, she continued. I'm confident it will validate the innovative approach we've taken with the basement workspace program. After she left, I sat in my fluorescent-lit prison trying to process what I'd just witnessed. Jessica had managed to reframe my harassment as a legitimate business experiment, complete with external validation from expensive consultants, who would probably recommend expanding the basement model to other employees. She wasn't just covering her tracks, she was turning her abuse into a potential company policy that could destroy other people's lives while enhancing her reputation as an innovative manager. That afternoon brought a call from Marcus in IT, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Sarah, I just got a request from Jessica to implement the basement monitoring system on 3 more employees. She wants to expand what she's calling the enhanced productivity program to other departments. My blood ran cold. Jessica wasn't content with destroying my professional life. She was planning to systematize her harassment tactics and apply them to other unsuspecting employees. The basement model was becoming a template for workplace control that she could use against anyone who crossed her or threatened her authority. Which employees? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Jennifer from marketing, that new guy in accounting, and surprisingly Amanda. My supervisor who'd questioned Jessica's decisions and advocated for my access to be restored. Jessica was targeting her for the same treatment she'd given me, which meant speaking up in my defense had marked Amanda as an enemy who needed to be controlled or eliminated. Marcus, you have to find a way to delay that implementation. I'm trying, but she has legitimate authority to request productivity monitoring tools. Unless someone with higher authority countermands her orders, I have to comply with facilities management requests. The conversation ended with both of us feeling helpless against Jessica's expanding campaign of systematic workplace abuse. She'd discovered that her methods worked, that they could be defended as legitimate business practices, and that she could scale them up to target multiple employees simultaneously. Wednesday brought the consultant's preliminary report, delivered via email to all department heads, with a subject line that made my stomach drop. Basement Workspace Innovation, Recommendations for Company-Wide Implementation. Jessica had gotten exactly what she wanted, external validation for her harassment tactics, disguised as management innovation. The report praised the focused work environment and enhanced accountability measures, while recommending gradual expansion of the basement model to other departments. The consultants had bought Jessica's narrative completely, describing my professional exile as a successful pilot program that could revolutionize workplace productivity across the entire company. But buried in the technical appendices, I found something interesting. The air quality measurements showed concerning levels of chemical residue from the construction work, and the noise analysis revealed sound levels that exceeded recommended workplace standards during certain hours. The ergonomic assessment flagged multiple deficiencies in my workspace setup, and the psychological impact section included notes about potential employee stress indicators requiring monitoring. The consultants had documented the problems with my working conditions, even while praising Jessica's overall approach. They'd recorded evidence that my basement office was genuinely harmful to employee health and well-being, but they'd buried those findings in technical language that made them easy to overlook. I forwarded the full report to my personal email and began highlighting every section that documented hazardous or substandard working conditions. If Jessica wanted to use consultant validation to expand her harassment program, I'd use the same report to document the harmful impact of her policies on employee health and safety. Thursday morning brought the news I'd been dreading. Amanda received her own relocation notice, effective immediately, to a newly prepared basement office, 3 doors down from mine. The email used identical language to the one I'd received weeks earlier, describing the move as part of departmental optimization initiatives and enhanced focus protocols. I watched my supervisor pack her belongings with the same bewildered expression I'd worn during my own forced relocation. She was being punished for defending me, turned into another victim of Jessica's expanding campaign to control and isolate anyone who questioned her authority. This is insane, Amanda muttered as she carried her box of personal items toward the elevator. Marketing directors don't work in basements. This violates every principle of effective team management. But Jessica had prepared for Amanda's resistance. The relocation was temporary, she explained in follow-up communications, designed to allow Amanda to better understand the innovative workspace model before helping implement it across other departments. She was being positioned as a collaborative partner in the basement expansion rather than a victim of retaliation. By Friday, both Amanda and I were working in adjacent basement caves, subject to the same surveillance monitoring and daily reporting requirements that had made my life miserable for weeks. The difference was that Amanda had 15 years of management experience and wasn't going to accept professional degradation quietly. "I'm calling the CEO directly," she announced during one of our whispered conversations in the hallway between our offices. "This isn't legitimate business practice. This is systematic harassment with a corporate veneer. Be careful," I warned. "Jessica has documentation for everything. She'll make it look like you're being insubordinate or resistant to innovative management approaches. Let her try." I've been in this industry long enough to recognize abuse when I see it, and I'm not going to let some facilities manager destroy my department with pseudo-scientific management theories. Amanda's confidence gave me hope, but I also worried that her direct confrontation approach would give Jessica ammunition to portray her as an obstructionist who couldn't adapt to changing workplace dynamics. Jessica had become expert at using corporate language to disguise personal vendettas, and she'd probably find ways to make Amanda's resistance look like professional incompetence. That weekend, as I tried to maintain normal routines with Emma while processing the escalating workplace crisis, I received a text message that changed everything. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but the message made my hands shake. "I used to work at Jessica's previous company. We need to talk." She did this before. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Who is this?" "My name is Carol Zhang. I was a department manager at Riverside Retail, where Jessica worked before Hartwell. She targeted me the same way she's targeting you. I have documentation." Carol Zhang, a witness to Jessica's pattern of workplace harassment, who had evidence that this wasn't an isolated incident or a response to specific workplace conflict. Jessica had used these tactics before, which meant her systematic approach wasn't something she'd developed specifically for me, but rather a refined methodology she'd perfected on previous victims. We arranged to meet at Mountain Peak Cafe on Sunday afternoon, and I spent the rest of the weekend alternating between nervous anticipation and cautious hope. If Carol could provide evidence of Jessica's previous harassment campaigns, it might finally give me the ammunition I needed to challenge her authority and protect other employees from becoming her next victim. Carol turned out to be a woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and the slightly haunted expression of someone who'd survived corporate warfare. She arrived at the coffee shop carrying a thick folder that she placed on the table between us like evidence in a criminal case. Jessica Parker, now Jessica Mitchell, was hired as an operations manager at Riverside Retail 18 months ago, she began without preamble. Within 6 months, she'd systematically targeted 3 female employees, who she perceived as threats to her authority or advancement opportunity. She opened the folder and spread out documents, email printouts, policy memos, performance reviews, and what appeared to be legal correspondence. The pattern was eerily familiar: isolation tactics, surveillance measures, impossible reporting requirements, and gradual escalation of workplace restrictions. She moved one employee to a storage room office with no window. She implemented monitoring software that tracked another employee's every keystroke and bathroom break. She created policy exceptions that applied to specific individuals while claiming they were company-wide initiatives. The similarities to my own experience were chilling, but what made my blood run cold was Carol's description of how the campaigns had ended. 2 employees quit before she could build enough documentation to fire them. The third, a woman named Patricia Rodriguez, tried to fight back through HR and legal channels. Jessica buried her in disciplinary proceedings and performance improvement plans until Patricia had a nervous breakdown and went on medical leave. She never came back. Carol leaned forward, her expression intense. "Jessica is systematic about this. She chooses targets carefully, usually women who might compete with her or question her authority. She uses legitimate business language to disguise personal vendettas, and she's patient enough to build cases over months or years." What happened to Jessica at Riverside? The company went through a merger and downsized operations. Jessica positioned herself as essential to the transition and managed to avoid accountability for the employees who'd been driven out. She left with glowing references and probably a severance package. Carol pulled out a business card and handed it to me. I've been documenting workplace harassment cases for 3 years now, trying to build a pattern that might eventually stop her. I found out about your situation through a mutual contact who works in Denver's insurance industry. A mutual contact. I wondered how many people in professional circles were already talking about my basement exile and the unusual policies being implemented at Hartwell Insurance. Corporate Denver was smaller than most people realized, and workplace gossip traveled fast between companies. What can we do with this information? Build a federal case for systematic workplace harassment based on gender discrimination. Jessica targets women specifically, uses her authority to create hostile work environments, and has a documented pattern of this behavior across multiple employers. That's not just corporate politics, that's potentially illegal discrimination. The prospect of federal legal action felt both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it would mean escalating my situation far beyond internal company politics, potentially damaging my career prospects across the entire industry. Liberating because it would finally give me weapons to fight back against Jessica's systematic campaign. I need time to think about this, I said, though part of me was already calculating the risks and benefits of nuclear legal warfare. Take all the time you need, but don't wait too long. Jessica is expanding her program at Hartwell, which means more women are going to become her victim. And based on her pattern, she's building towards something bigger with you specifically. Carol gathered her documents and stood to leave, but paused at the edge of the table. One more thing, Patricia Rodriguez, the woman who had the breakdown at Riverside. She's doing better now. She's working at a great company with supportive management, and she's willing to testify if we can build a case that might prevent other women from going through what she experienced. After Carol left, I sat in the coffee shop staring at her business card and trying to process everything I'd learned. Jessica wasn't just a vindictive ex-wife using workplace authority to settle personal scores. She was a serial harasser who'd perfected her techniques on multiple victims across different companies, always managing to avoid consequences while destroying careers and lives. The realization was both crushing and empowering. Crushing because it meant I was dealing with someone far more dangerous and calculating than I'd imagined. Empowering because it meant I wasn't alone, wasn't imagining things, and wasn't the first person to recognize Jessica's systematic abuse tactic. Monday morning brought news that confirmed Carol's warning about Jessica building towards something bigger. I arrived at my basement office to find a memo announcing my assignment to a performance improvement plan, effective immediately. The PIP included weekly goal-setting sessions with Jessica, daily productivity assessments, and monthly reviews that would determine my continued employment eligibility. Performance improvement plans were typically used for employees who were failing to meet basic job requirements. They were the corporate equivalent of death row, giving companies documented justification for termination while providing a thin veneer of employee support and development opportunity. But my performance metrics were above average, my campaign results were consistently strong, and my supervisor Amanda had given me positive reviews throughout my time at Hartwell. The PIP included weekly goal-setting sessions, with Jessica's next escalation in her systematic campaign to force me out of the company. The first goal-setting session was scheduled for Wednesday afternoon in Jessica's office, and I spent Tuesday night preparing for what felt like trial preparation. I gathered copies of all my campaign results, positive client feedback, and productivity metrics from before the basement exile began. If Jessica wanted to challenge my performance, I'd have documentation proving that any recent deficiencies were directly attributable to the impossible working conditions she'd created. Wednesday afternoon, I sat across from Jessica's imposing desk while she reviewed the PIP documentation with the satisfaction of someone who'd finally maneuvered her opponent into checkmate position. "I want you to know that this process is designed to help you succeed," she began with false sincerity. We've identified some areas where your performance could be strengthened, and the PIA provides structure and support to help you reach your full potential. The gaslighting was masterful. Jessica was positioning systematic harassment as employee development, making my victimization look like professional opportunity. Anyone reviewing the documentation would see a concerned manager trying to help a struggling employee rather than a predator finalizing her attack. What specific performance deficiencies triggered this plan? I asked, keeping my voice level despite the anger burning in my chest. Jessica consulted her notes with theatrical precision. We've observed declining collaboration with colleagues, reduced participation in department meetings, and some concerns about attitude and adaptability to changing workplace dynamics. Declining collaboration, reduced participation, attitude problem. She was documenting the natural consequences of my basement isolation and presenting them as character flaws that justified punitive measures. It was brilliant and evil in equal measure. Those issues seem directly related to the workspace changes and access restrictions that have been implemented, I pointed out carefully. That's exactly the kind of attitude we need to address, Jessica replied smoothly. Successful employees adapt to changing circumstances rather than making excuses or blaming external factors for performance challenges. She was boxing me into an impossible position. Any defense of my performance would be characterized as excuse-making or failure to take responsibility. Any acknowledgement of problems would be documented as admission of professional deficiencies. The PIA was designed to ensure my failure regardless of my actual work quality or effort level. The session continued for 45 minutes, with Jessica setting impossible goals and contradictory expectations while maintaining the facade of supportive management. I needed to increase collaboration while working in isolation, improve meeting participation while being restricted from accessing most department gatherings, and demonstrate positive attitude while enduring systematic workplace harassment. When it ended, I walked back to my basement cave, feeling like I'd just been sentenced to professional execution. The PIA gave Jessica official documentation to justify my termination within 60 to 90 days, regardless of my actual performance during that period. She'd finally maneuvered me into a position where fighting back would look like insubordination, and compliance would lead to inevitable failure. That evening, I called Carol Zhang from my kitchen table while Emma did homework in the living room. She put me on a performance improvement plan, I said without preamble. How long? 90 days, but it's designed to ensure failure. The goals are impossible given the working conditions she's created. Carol was quiet for a moment. That's her endgame strategy. She used the same approach with Patricia Rodriguez. The PIA provides legal cover for termination while making it look like the employee's fault.
What are my options? Fight or flee? Fighting means federal discrimination charges, which will be expensive and time-consuming but might stop her from destroying other women's careers. Fleeing means finding another job before she can fire you, but it leaves her free to target the next woman who crosses her path. The choice felt impossible. Fighting meant risking everything on a legal battle against someone who'd proven expert at covering her tracks and manipulating corporate systems. Fleeing meant abandoning Amanda and other potential victims to Jessica's systematic abuse, while potentially carrying the stigma of having been fired or forced out of my position. There's a third option, Carol continued. We could build the case while you're still employed, gather evidence and witness statements, then file charges that protect you from retaliation and potentially save your job. How? Document everything from now on. Record conversations if it's legal in Colorado. Save every email, memo, and policy change. Get statements from colleagues who've witnessed the harassment. Build a case so strong that Jessica can't hide behind corporate policy anymore. The plan would require me to become a secret investigator in my own workplace harassment case, gathering evidence while pretending to comply with Jessica's impossible demand. It was risky and exhausting, but it offered the possibility of not just surviving her campaign, but stopping her from destroying other women's lives. What about Amanda and the other employees she's targeting? They're potential witnesses and co-plaintiffs. If we can show a pattern of targeting multiple women, it strengthens the discrimination case significantly. After hanging up with Carol,
I sat in my quiet kitchen making the biggest decision of my professional life. I could accept defeat, find another job, and hope Jessica would leave me alone once I was no longer a perceived threat. Or I could fight back with everything I had, risking immediate termination, but potentially stopping a serial harasser who'd perfected her techniques on multiple victims across different companies. I thought about Emma sleeping upstairs, trusting me to provide stability and security in a world that had already been disrupted by divorce and custody arrangements. I thought about Amanda trapped in her own basement cave, being punished for defending me. I thought about Patricia Rodriguez having a nervous breakdown because someone with authority had systematically destroyed her confidence and career prospects. The decision crystallized with sudden clarity. I wasn't just fighting for my job anymore. I was fighting for every woman Jessica had targeted, was currently targeting, or would target in the future. I was fighting for the principle that workplace authority shouldn't be used as a weapon for personal vendettas or gender-based harassment. Thursday morning, I began my secret campaign of evidence gathering. I set up a secure email account for documentation, began recording conversations on my phone when legally permissible, and started reaching out to colleagues who'd witnessed Jessica's unusual policies and systematic harassment tactics. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Employees across multiple departments had noticed the bizarre basement relocations, the surveillance equipment installations, and the increasingly authoritarian policies Jessica was implementing. They'd been confused and concerned but hadn't known how to address systematic abuse, disguised as management innovation. Marcus from IT provided technical documentation of the monitoring software installations and policy exceptions Jessica had requested. Jennifer from marketing shared screenshots of increasingly aggressive emails about productivity expectations and workplace compliance. Even employees who barely knew me personally were willing to provide statements about the hostile work environment Jessica was creating. By Friday afternoon, I had enough documentation to fill a federal complaint, but I needed one more crucial piece of evidence: proof that Jessica's harassment was specifically targeted at women rather than generally poor management that affected all employees equally. The proof came in the form of a leaked email from Jessica to Kevin, forwarded to me by a mutual acquaintance who worked in Denver's legal community. The message was brief but devastating. The basement program is working perfectly. Sarah is finally learning her place, and I've identified several other women who need similar attitude adjustments. By the end of the year, I'll have this whole company running exactly the way it should. Sarah is finally learning her place. The phrase revealed Jessica's true motivations with stunning clarity. This wasn't about workplace efficiency or management innovation. This was about a woman using corporate authority to punish other women who threatened her sense of dominance or control. She was systematically targeting female employees for harassment, while disguising her abuse as legitimate business practices. Monday morning, exactly 10 weeks after Jessica had first moved me to the basement, I walked into the offices of Morrison Chen and Associates, the employment law firm Carol had recommended. I carried with me a comprehensive file documenting systematic workplace harassment, gender-based discrimination, and corporate policy abuse that had affected multiple employees across several months. The attorney, Patricia Morrison, reviewed my documentation with the focused intensity of someone who'd built her career fighting corporate abuse and workplace discrimination. She asked detailed questions about Jessica's tactics, the company's response to employee complaints, and the pattern of targeting female employees, specifically. "This is one of the most comprehensive harassment cases I've seen," she said finally. "You've documented everything: the systematic isolation, the surveillance overreach, the impossible performance standards, and most importantly, the pattern of gender-based targeting. We can file federal discrimination charges that will protect you from retaliation while potentially securing justice for other victims." The complaint was filed on Wednesday morning, and by Thursday afternoon, Jessica was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The news spread through Hartwell Insurance like wildfire, with employees emerging from their professional hiding places to share stories of harassment, intimidation, and systematic abuse they'd endured under Jessica's management. Amanda was restored to her proper office within days, and I followed shortly after. The basement monitoring equipment was removed, the access restrictions were lifted, and the performance improvement plan was suspended, pending resolution of the discrimination investigation. But the real victory came 6 months later, when Jessica's systematic harassment campaign became the subject of a federal investigation that revealed a pattern of abuse spanning 3 companies and at least 8 female victims. Patricia Rodriguez testified about her breakdown at Riverside Retail. Carol provided documentation of the broader harassment pattern, and current Hartwell employees shared their experiences of intimidation and systematic abuse. Jessica was terminated from Hartwell, banned from holding management positions in Colorado's insurance industry, and required to pay substantial settlements to multiple victims. More importantly, her case became a training example used by HR departments and employment lawyers to identify and prevent systematic workplace harassment, disguised as management innovation. The experience changed me in ways I hadn't expected. Fighting back against systematic abuse had reminded me of my own strength and resilience, but it had also connected me to a community of women who'd survived similar battles and were committed to preventing other women from enduring what we'd experienced. A year later, I was promoted to marketing director at Hartwell Insurance, with a corner office that had windows, natural light, and most importantly, a door I could close for privacy or open for collaboration, as the situation required. Emma's science fair project that year was about workplace equality and the importance of speaking up when you witness injustice, a topic she'd chosen after learning about my fight against Jessica's harassment campaign. Kevin and I maintained our custody arrangement without interference from outside parties, and Emma learned valuable lessons about standing up to bullies and supporting people who are being treated unfairly. She never had to endure another weekend volcano project designed to insert Jessica into our family dynamics, because Jessica was no longer part of our lives in any capacity. The basement at Hartwell Insurance was converted into a proper employee break room, with comfortable seating, natural lighting, and no surveillance equipment whatsoever. Sometimes I visit that space during lunch breaks, remembering the woman I was when I worked down there in isolation and fear, and celebrating the woman I became when I found the courage to fight back against systematic abuse. Because sometimes, when someone tries to bury you in a basement, they're really just teaching you how strong you are in the dark. And when you finally claw your way back to the light, you're not just surviving anymore, you're thriving, and you're making sure no one else has to dig their way out of the hole that was meant to break you. The morning everything exploded started like any other day in my basement prison. I arrived at 7:30 to find the construction crew setting up for another round of improvements that would make my workspace even more unbearable. Jessica had apparently decided that the basement needed new flooring, which meant jackhammers and industrial sanders would be operating directly outside my office door for the foreseeable future. The noise was beyond anything I'd experienced before. The jackhammers created a rhythmic pounding that seemed to vibrate through my skull, while the sanders produced a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. Within an hour I had a splitting headache that no amount of medication could touch, and the air was thick with concrete dust, despite the supposedly improved ventilation system. I tried calling Jessica to report the impossible working conditions, but her assistant informed me that she was in back-to-back meetings all morning and wouldn't be available until after lunch. The timing felt deliberate, ensuring that I'd have to endure the industrial symphony for at least 6 hours before I could even request relief. By 10 o'clock I was genuinely concerned about my health. The concrete dust was making me cough, the noise was causing physical pain, and the vibrations from the jackhammers were making it impossible to focus on anything requiring concentration. When I tried to work on the Morrison campaign materials, my hands were shaking so badly from the building vibrations that I couldn't type accurately. I made a decision that would have seemed impossible weeks earlier. I packed up my laptop and essential materials, walked out of the basement, and set up a temporary workspace in the main lobby. If Jessica wanted to cite me for abandoning my assigned office, so be it. I wasn't going to risk my health for her twisted power game. The lobby workspace felt like emerging from an underground bunker into civilization. Natural light streamed through the windows, the air was clean and breathable, and the only sounds were normal office conversations and the gentle hum of the coffee shop. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could think clearly and breathe deeply. I'd been working productively for about 2 hours when Jessica appeared, her expression a perfect blend of concern and disappointment that I'd seen her practice in mirrors during our marriage counseling session. "Sarah, I heard you abandoned your office this morning. I'm concerned about what message that sends regarding your commitment and professionalism." Several employees in the lobby turned to look at us, and I realized Jessica had chosen a public location for this confrontation deliberately. She wanted witnesses to see her addressing my supposed insubordination, while positioning herself as the reasonable manager dealing with a difficult employee. "The construction noise and dust made it impossible to work safely," I replied, keeping my voice calm despite my racing heart. "I understand that construction can be disruptive, but part of being a professional is adapting to temporary challenges rather than abandoning our responsibilities." Adapting to temporary challenge. She was making it sound like I'd fled at the first sign of minor inconvenience, rather than escaping genuinely hazardous working conditions. The air quality was compromised, and the noise level exceeded any reasonable workplace standard. "That's your perception, but our safety monitors indicate that all conditions are within acceptable ranges. I'm afraid this looks more like an employee choosing convenience over commitment." Jessica had prepared for this moment, probably installing air quality monitors that would show technically acceptable readings despite the obviously hazardous condition. She was creating a narrative where my health concerns were really excuses to avoid work, and she was doing it in front of colleagues who would remember this conversation if she ever needed witnesses to my supposed unprofessionalism. "I need to return to my assigned workspace now," she continued, her voice carrying just enough authority to make it clear this wasn't a request. "We can discuss accommodation options through proper channels if you feel you need special consideration." She was positioning basic workplace safety as an unusual request that would require bureaucratic approval, making me seem high maintenance and demanding. I gathered my materials and followed Jessica back toward the basement, feeling like a prisoner being returned to solitary confinement. The construction noise was even worse than before, and the concrete dust had settled on every surface in my office, like industrial snow. Jessica stood in my doorway surveying the chaos with apparent satisfaction. "I know it's not ideal, but the improvements will make this space so much better in the long run. Sometimes we have to endure temporary discomfort for long-term benefits." She left me alone with the jackhammers and my growing certainty that she was trying to drive me to a complete breakdown. The working conditions were genuinely dangerous, but she'd positioned my complaints as evidence of unprofessionalism and inability to adapt to challenging circumstances. That afternoon, the situation reached a breaking point when the construction crew accidentally damaged a water pipe, flooding my office with several inches of muddy water mixed with concrete debris. I stood in my doorway watching my computer equipment disappear under the murky flood, feeling like I was witnessing the final destruction of my professional life. The maintenance crew arrived quickly to address the water damage, but they informed me that my office would be uninhabitable for at least a week while they dried everything out and assessed damage to the electrical system. My computer was completely destroyed, along with several client files and campaign materials I'd been developing. When I called Jessica to report the flooding, her response was immediate and devastating. "Oh no, that's terrible. Unfortunately, with your office out of commission, we'll need to put you on temporary unpaid leave while we sort out alternative workspace arrangements. I know it's not ideal, but we simply don't have other basement space available right now." Unpaid leave. She was using the construction disaster she'd created to suspend my income, while making it appear to be an unfortunate accident, rather than the predictable result of her systematically dangerous policies. "What about a temporary desk in the marketing department?" "I'm afraid that's not possible. The basement security protocols we discussed don't allow for employees to work in unauthorized areas without proper clearance procedures." The security protocols she'd invented specifically to control my movements were now being used to justify cutting off my paycheck entirely. Jessica had orchestrated a perfect storm of workplace harassment that culminated in financial punishment disguised as unfortunate circumstances. "How long will the unpaid leave last?" "It's difficult to say. The water damage assessment could take several days, then we'll need to coordinate with facilities management, HR, and your supervisor to determine the best long-term solution. These things take time to resolve properly. She was giving herself unlimited time to keep me suspended without pay while claiming to work on solutions through proper channels. I could be financially strangled for weeks or months while Jessica pretended to navigate bureaucratic procedures that she was actually using to prevent any resolution. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table staring at bills I suddenly couldn't afford to pay, trying to explain to Emma why Mommy seemed so stressed and distracted. The mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks, and without my paycheck I'd have to choose between keeping the house and buying groceries. Kevin called during dinner ostensibly to discuss Emma's upcoming school conference, but really to deliver what felt like a coordinated psychological attack. Jessica mentioned there was some kind of flooding at your office today. She said the company is working hard to find you alternative arrangements. Jessica had already briefed him on her version of events, positioning herself as helpful and me as the victim of unfortunate circumstances, rather than systematic harassment. The situation is complicated, I said carefully, not wanting to involve Emma in adult workplace drama. Well, Jessica offered to help if you need anything during the transition. She really wants things to work out well for everyone. The offer of help from the woman who'd orchestrated my professional destruction felt like salt in an open wound. Jessica was positioning herself as the caring stepmother concerned about my well-being while secretly working to destroy my financial stability and career prospects. After Emma went to bed, I spent hours researching my legal options and trying to document the systematic harassment I'd endured. But Jessica had been careful to make everything appear legitimate, and I had no concrete proof that her decisions were motivated by personal animosity rather than business considerations. The next morning brought an email that felt like a final nail in my professional coffin. Jessica had scheduled a mandatory meeting to discuss my employment status and future opportunities with HR present. The meeting was set for Friday afternoon, giving me exactly 2 days to prepare for what sounded like termination disguised as career counseling. I spent those 2 days reaching out to employment lawyers and trying to understand my rights as an employee who'd been systematically harassed and financially punished through workplace policies. The responses were discouraging. Without clear evidence of discriminatory intent or documented policy violations, I had little legal recourse against decisions that could be justified as legitimate business practices. Friday afternoon arrived with gray skies and cold rain that perfectly matched my mood as I walked into Hartwell Insurance for what might be my final day as an employee. The meeting was held in the main conference room with Jessica, Linda from HR, and Amanda present. The formal setting felt like a tribunal convened to determine my professional fate. Jessica began with her trademark combination of false sympathy and corporate doublespeak. Sarah, we wanted to discuss your situation and explore options that might work for everyone involved. The basement workspace challenges have created some unexpected complications that we need to address thoughtfully. Unexpected complications. She was characterizing the systematic harassment and dangerous working conditions as unforeseen difficulties, rather than the predictable results of her deliberately hostile policies. Linda from HR consulted her notes with the careful precision of someone following a script. We've reviewed the circumstances surrounding your temporary leave and the workspace challenges you've experienced. While we recognize that the construction issues created some disruption, we're concerned about the pattern of adaptation difficulties and compliance issues that preceded the flooding incident. Pattern of adaptation difficulty. They were reframing my resistance to systematic harassment as personality flaws that made me unsuitable for continued employment. We want to offer you a choice, Jessica continued, her voice warm with fake compassion. You can accept a voluntary resignation with a positive reference and a small severance package, or we can continue working through the performance improvement plan process, though that path will require significant changes in attitude and approach to workplace challenges. The choice was designed to force my resignation while making it appear voluntary: accept defeat and leave quietly with minimal compensation, or continue fighting through a rigged system that would inevitably lead to termination for cause. I looked around the conference room at the 3 women who held my professional future in their hands. Linda seemed uncomfortable but was clearly following Jessica's lead. Amanda looked angry but powerless to intervene in what had become an HR matter. Jessica sat confidently, probably savoring the moment she'd been building toward for months. "I need time to consider my options," I said finally. "Of course," Jessica replied smoothly. "Take the weekend to think it over. We'll need a decision by Monday morning so we can move forward with the appropriate paperwork." As I walked out of the conference room, I felt like I was attending my own professional funeral. Jessica had systematically destroyed my working conditions, isolated me from colleagues, documented my forced responses as performance problems, and finally used a construction disaster to justify cutting off my income. Now she was offering me the choice between voluntary resignation and inevitable termination, both of which would leave her free to target other women without consequence. That weekend I made a decision that surprised even me. Instead of accepting defeat or continuing to fight a battle I couldn't win alone, I decided to expose Jessica's systematic harassment campaign to the wider professional community. If I was going down, I was going to make sure other women knew what they were dealing with. I spent Saturday and Sunday documenting everything Jessica had done, from the initial basement relocation through the construction harassment and final forced resignation. I compiled emails, policy memos, surveillance screenshots, and witness statements into a comprehensive case study of workplace harassment disguised as management innovation. Then I did something that would have been unthinkable months earlier. I created a detailed post on professional networking sites, describing my experience and warning other women about Jessica's systematic harassment tactic. I named her specifically, included her employment history, and provided enough detail that anyone considering hiring her would understand exactly what kind of manager they were bringing into their organization. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours I received messages from women at 3 different companies who'd experienced similar harassment from Jessica or managers using identical tactics. The post was shared hundreds of times, and several employment lawyers reached out to discuss potential legal action. Monday morning, I walked into Jessica's office and delivered my decision with the calm confidence of someone who'd already won the only battle that really mattered. "I accept the voluntary resignation offer, but I want the severance agreement to include a mutual non-disparagement clause." Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly, probably sensing that my easy acceptance was somehow a trap. "That should be fine. We're just glad we could find a solution that works for everyone." What she didn't know was that my professional networking post had already been viewed by thousands of people, including several executives at companies where Jessica had previously worked. The non-disparagement clause would prevent her from retaliating against me legally, but it couldn't undo the professional reputation damage she'd already suffered. By Wednesday, Jessica had been placed on administrative leave, pending investigation of the workplace harassment allegations that had emerged from my post. The systematic basement relocations, surveillance overreach, and construction harassment had attracted attention from corporate leadership, who finally understood that these weren't innovative management techniques, but systematic abuse disguised as business practices. Within a month, Jessica had resigned from Hartwell Insurance, rather than face a formal investigation that would have exposed her harassment methods to legal scrutiny. She left Denver entirely, apparently understanding that her professional reputation in the city was permanently damaged. I spent the next 6 months rebuilding my career at a company where basement offices were used for storage, not employee punishment. But more importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the best way to win against systematic harassment isn't to fight the system but to expose it so completely that everyone can see what's really happening behind the corporate language and policy justification. Jessica had taught me that workplace authority could be weaponized against vulnerable employees, but she'd also inadvertently taught me that sunlight was the best disinfectant for toxic management practices. When you drag systematic harassment out of the shadows and force people to see it clearly, the harassers lose their most powerful weapon, the ability to hide their abuse behind legitimate-sounding business decisions. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.